All right, good day to you. God bless you. Welcome to the Shepherd's Chapel. Hey, welcome to this family Bible study. Our praise God, our Father's words. Well, we got through with the book of Corinthians, and we're going to have a little special today. We're going to talk about America. We're going to talk about our military. We're going to talk about your military. There's one thing I want you to know, and I don't want you to ever forget. First, I think I'll lead into this in this regard. We're getting in a habit in this nation of showing this program and that program where we see, yes, when I was a child I was mistreated and my dad did this to me and my mother did this. I'm not talking about child abuse or anything of that nature. I'm just talking about my dad was an alcoholic, and I've heard so much of this poor me baby stuff till I've had it up to here. Of people trying to blame their own faults on somebody else. Now you go out to these psychiatrists and pay them $90 an hour. Now there are people that need a psychiatrist. But when you're looking for someone to blame your own troubles on, they're your fault. It wasn't something your dad did. I took a little shot here and there, and I'm not condoning that or saying it's right. I'm just saying that does not shape your life. Be a man or a woman of God and stand up and answer for your own habits. I've got habits. I don't try to blame them on anybody else. They're mine. And friend, you can't deal with them until you realize they are your faults, your habits. Don't go trying to blame them off on somebody else, especially at $90 an hour. That is really stupid. I like can-do type people, not poor me babies. Poor me babies, it would seem, are anymore a dime a dozen, and I can see that the media, talk shows, this, that, and the other, are hatching out crop after crop after crop of making people think that they don't realize what happened when they were younger or older or in between or whatever. Well, I just blocked that out. Or don't. Hey, you're you, and you have to answer for yourself. Now, there are sicknesses, mental sickness and other, that I'm not talking about. I believe in supporting the handicapped and the ill right to the last chunk. I mean, we can take care of our ill. But I get tired of well people, nothing wrong with them, other than a bunch of crybabies, trying to put all their problems off on somebody else rather than standing up and playing the part of a man, woman, or child and taking responsibility for your own actions. It's, friend, in God's eyes, and not in mine anyway, and I'm sure not in our Father's, it just don't fly. I like mature people that are able to say, yep, I've got a fault and it's my fault. If your father took a drink, came in late, raised sand and everything, it should have been a good example to you of what not to be. You should have a can-do type person learns from every experience they come in contact with. Now, perhaps that's an oversimplification, but I'm going to tell you something. Your psychiatrist might say that's an oversimplification, but I'm going to tell you something. That's the only way you can overcome it, is to take responsibility for your own fault, stand up, and do something about it. Grab your own bootlaces and pull yourself up, and stop trying to blame things on somebody else. Nobody's perfect. Our parents weren't necessarily perfect, some of them pretty close to it. But that doesn't change the fact that you're an individual, and you have to answer for what you do. Okay? Now, I don't know. Did any of you need that? I really don't know why I wanted to say that, other than it would seem that every talk show in the country, I'm glad I don't have time to watch them all the time, are very depressing because of this poor me baby stuff. It just really gets to me. I love can-do type people. You lay it out there, we can cut it, friend. We can get it done. And that's the way you should be. Okay, now, your military, your nation, Well, what do you mean my nation? This is a one nation under God. It is of the people, by the people, and for the people. We are the people. And if we allow certain things to take place in this nation that create a benchmark, then it must go through our elected officials before it can become law or before it can be a precedent set for the future. And quite frankly, I'm leading up to gays in our military. Now, being an old military man myself, with many years in the Marine Corps, and an old combat veteran, I can tell you, coming out the gate, even as a military person, it's not going to fly. Yeah, you've got a few scattered around it now, and I've known a few of them, and they lead a life most miserable indeed, in fear. It is a dangerous place once someone is identified. Call it right, wrong, or in between. That's just the way it is, my friends. And there's a far more serious aspect to this. Therefore, it behooves us as a nation and as the people of that nation that we do something about someone that tries to set a benchmark, a precedent, or a law. It must pass not only the Congress and the Senate, it must pass the people. Because we are their boss. We tell them what to do. And as a Christian nation, and as Christians, this is one time we're going to have a voice in it. I want to say one thing right now. There are many gays that in studying with this ministry, as a matter of fact, I understand a matter of minutes ago, one such person called and indicated how much this program had helped them straighten their life away and get things in gear, get things right, because they also are can-do type people. So I want you people to know that I'm not picking on you. If anything, I'm protecting you. And within this, it is a matter for the nation, of the people, by the people, and for the people. It has to do with the blessings of our Father on this nation, and God does bless America. But we have to know what our Father feels about these things. As a teacher of the Word, I always let the Word, let God direct the course. Let God speak. And when He speaks, my friend, we must do it. We must follow that path. Okay, with that thought in mind, and I might say one other thing. Well, while we have time, and we do, there are many who would say, oh, my word, you don't understand about the separation of church and state. Oh, I think I do. If you would say that, maybe you don't. The reason we have this clause that brings about the separation of church and state is the fact that when our forefathers came here, they lived in a nation that forced one church upon them. They were forced to be a part of that church, and that church reigned supreme. The church passed the laws, basically. That is wrong. Therefore, in this nation, by our forefathers, it was so set aside that the government could not establish a church and have that church become a part of the state, passing law or commandments upon the people. But in no way whatsoever did it ever say, or was it ever intended, that those members of the so-called churches, that as citizens of the nation, were not also members, even though they were church members, would not also be members of the state. Therefore, they have an open voice. I do not believe it is right for church people necessarily to participate or really go all the way out in partisan politics. As a matter of fact, we have a law that prevents churches from involving themselves in partisan politics. And I tend to agree with that. I think we have a right to express our opinions as far as nonpartisan politics go. I don't think it, I know it. What I'm about to say is nonpartisan. It has to do with only one thing, and that is your so-called commander-in-chief trying to pass a law that forces upon the military the acceptance of homosexuals. Now, it is rather strange that a man that is a draft dodger could become such a military expert just, in a matter of 100 days or more. A man who absolutely went to a foreign nation and demonstrated against our military, against our nation, and moves himself through whatever methods, promises, and becomes so-called commander-in-chief. The people in our military cannot speak out against that man. Why? He is their commander-in-chief, even if he is a draft dodger. They have to be very careful. The man is not disciplined. The man does not understand the military. The man, as far as I know, never even belonged to a Boy Scout troop, much less a military organization. Therefore, we must speak not only for ourselves, but for our military, because they are handcuffed, even as one general in somewhere up north, was it Alaska? Somewhere up north, at a banquet which was separate from the military, called him a draft-dodging, womanizing, something else. I mean, it was all true. But he's being hung out to dry about it. Well, that's what happens to the military if they speak. That doesn't happen to us. We have freedom of speech, and we have freedom of religion. Our religion as Christians very strongly prohibits ourselves, and it is our military, and it is our nation, having anything to do with such an order. Because I'm going to tell you something. Do we have gays in the military now? Hey, we always have had a few. Here or there, very sparse. I felt sorry for them. I pitied them because they were not happy people, and they would be the first, if they're honest, that would let you know that. If they are known. And it's not that big a deal to tell. Nobody hides in the closet. It becomes obvious. And I'm not saying that all of them flaunt it. But they are miserable indeed. But there is a far cry in this nation under God declaring they cannot serve in our military camp, and that's important. I'll document it here in a moment. And our nation, with its so-called commander-in-chief, giving orders that we as a people accept the fact that we may now place homosexuals in our military. That would make God very angry with us. And He, I can assure you, would remove His blessings from America. That's how serious it is. Now let me document that for you. God is the same yesterday. He's the same today as He will be forever. And His laws concerning our military, our how that we war and so forth, will never change. Except for the fact that when we come to the eternity, there will absolutely be no war. Let's call up Deuteronomy chapter 20, if we may, verse 1. Let's ask a word of wisdom from our Father as we look into our Father's Word on this subject. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 1, and it reads, When thou goest out to battle against thine enemies, and seest horses and chariots and a people more than thou, be not afraid of them, for the Lord thy God is with thee, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. Do you believe that the reason we would battle over Iraq with the night lit up with anti-aircraft fire that we would have no one hit. And the reason that the battle only lasted a matter of hours rather than days, was it our ingenuity? Yes. It was also God's blessings. God was with us. God has always been with us, and it is a promise that we will control our gates. But there comes a time, if something goes too far over center, the people themselves must act, and that's what we shall do, is act indeed. Okay? God is with us when we go out to war. And quite contrary to what some might think, what some powder puff might say to you. Verse 2. And it shall be, when ye are come nigh unto the battle, that the priest shall approach and speak unto the people. In other words, you're going to pray to the Father, talk to Him. Verse 3, and shall say unto them, Hear, O Israel, ye approach this day unto battle against your enemies. Let not your hearts faint, fear not, and do not tremble. Neither be ye terrified because of them. Verse 4, For the Lord your God is He that goeth with you, to fight for you against your enemies, to save you. My friends, that's why America has never lost a war. I know that some might say, well, what about you guys in Korea? Did you win? You bet we won. There was just a handful of us Marines caught up at the reservoir. We made it out just fine, though there were hundreds of thousands of Chinese, and that's no reflection on the Chinese. Why? God was with us. It was a miracle. And Vietnam, people will say, oh, what an awful war that was. Listen, those two wars broke the back of communism. It exists no longer. You can be very proud of your veterans of both those campaigns because they protected this nation as a Christian nation, whereby we have the freedom and the right and the guarantee to be able to do what you're seeing this man do right now. Speak out for the people, to the people, and with the people. That's a great freedom that is precious. It has been purchased at a high price by men and women of this nation. Don't ever fail to utilize it. Why? God has always been with us. Do you know the way you could change that? You know the way that... I'm going to turn over to the 23rd chapter, and I'm going to show you the way you could change that real quickly. It's about to be done, my friend, and it will be done by July the 15th if the people of this nation, believers, unbelievers, just the people in general, do not stand up and do something. Listen to me. I want to go to the 9th verse, if I may, of the 23rd chapter of Deuteronomy. And it reads, When the host goeth forth against thine enemies, then keep thee from every wicked thing. That means every unclean thing. Keep unclean things out of the military. The military has a full-time job doing its job without having something unclean within it. Even to the point, verse 10, if there be among you any man that is not clean by reason of uncleanliness, that chanceth him by night, then shall he go abroad out of the camp, he shall not come within the camp. Uncleanliness was usually, it could be any sickness or anything else. You separate him, isolate him. That's done even to this day. It's called quarantine. But there's also another uncleanliness that causes one to be separated from that camp. You're going to find out what it is in a moment. And, beloved, if you want God's blessings on this nation, you will act. Verse 11. But it shall be, when evening cometh on, he shall wash himself with water, and when the sun is down, he shall come into the camp again, if that be the case. Verse 12. Thou shalt have a place also without the camp whither thou shalt go forth abroad. In other words, to relieve yourself. What God is saying, I don't even want your straddle trench in the camp. I want it out of the camp. That's what many of you people in this modern age would call a straddle trench. Happens to be a restroom. All right, it's kind of a field type restroom. All right, that has been used in military since the beginning of time. He said, I don't want that in the camp. Verse 13. And thou shalt have a paddle upon thy weapon. That means a little shovel. And it shall be when thou wilt ease thyself abroad, that means go to the bathroom. I'm going to translate this where you're not going to have any trouble understanding it. Thou shalt dig therewith and shalt with the paddle, and shall turn back and cover that which cometh from thee. In other words, God says, I want a clean camp. Even down to your waist. That is to say, the body waist. Now verse 14. For the Lord thy God walketh in the midst of thy camp. God's with us. Always has been in our military camps. You may think, well, I always thought you Marines were a bunch of rowdies. Yeah, God was with us though. He may not have been very proud of some of the things we did, but in camp we were very disciplined. You never see men more disciplined than in a war situation. And to deliver thee. That's what he's there for. What's God there for? To deliver us, to see that we win. And to give up thine enemies before thee. Therefore shall thy camp be holy, and that he see no unclean thing in thee, and turn away from thee. What will God do if he sees an unclean thing among you? He'll turn away. He won't put up with it. Well, now, beloved, I'm honest in my teaching. The Hebrew manuscripts are very clear as to what God means here by unclean. There is no way from the English that you can very well decide, well, what did he mean unclean? He was talking about a very specific thing. And I'm going to insist, I don't even trust you to go to your Strongs. I'm going to have it put on the character generator, and I want you to see this word, unclean. What did he mean, you shall not have around you? I'm going to have to look to the side to read it for you. I'm on a camera away from it. Excuse my appearing that I'm looking away from you, but that's the way it's got to be. Okay. This is the Strong's word 6172. It's pronounced Irva. And its root is from 6188. The unclean means nudity, literally, especially depudenda, or figuratively disgrace or blemish. And what is this pendunia? Okay? What does that word mean? It has a very special meaning. It means the genitals that extend from the body. God said, I don't want to see those genitals, that the external genitals of your body, I don't want to see them out in the camp. Now, it is not unclean. The word means shame, all right? Something shameful. That is natural, naturally, even in modern day. That's no shame. We all have to relieve ourselves at times. But he's talking about using those external genitalia for something other than that is natural. Do you understand? God says, I don't want to see it. And if I'm with you, I better not see it. I don't know how God could make it any plainer, beloved. I really don't. That 6172 was your Hebrew word for that. It could not be made much clearer, but He's going to. I want to skip on, if I may, down to the 17th verse, where God still speaks. There shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel. That is to say, those tribes that migrated north over the Caucasus Mountains later became Caucasians, called Caucasians, settled Europe, many of them later coming to this nation, Canada, and so forth. Nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel. Now, you know what a sodomite is. I don't have to draw any pictures here. That falls under the category of what we call homosexual today. It's in that category, within that camp. As a matter of fact, that's why we have AIDS today in this nation and in the world, is sodomy. It is for that same reason that Christ would teach. It's going to be in the end days exactly as it was in Sodom and Gomorrah, that is to say, practicing sodomy. And you'll remember the two angels that came to Lot. And these men of the city came in the night. They didn't try to drag out the women. They wanted the two angels to seduce them. And of course the angels, being supernatural, zapped them and blinded them, and even in their blind, and it was even young kids with them, male kids, trying to grapple for these angels, and the stop, of course, was put to it by the destruction. Hey, you keep your camp clean and keep sodomy out of it, or God will leave it. This is very serious, my friend. Very, very serious. Verse 18, this will clarify it beyond any of your doubts. Thou shalt not bring the hire of a whore or the price of a dog into the house of the Lord thy God for any vow. For even both these are abomination. They are what? An abomination unto the Lord thy God. What does it mean? Well, the dog growers, the breeders just automatically get real nervous. Don't worry, that's not what it's talking about. It is a word that comes from a male prostitute practicing sodomy because of the position in that language. And it is called the price of a dog because of the position he must put himself within to practice his male prostitution in sodomy. You dog growers can tithe out of your dog money all you want to. That's not what God is talking about. It's homosexuality. He doesn't like it. He doesn't want it. To him it is an abomination. If you expect him to go to war with your sons in the future, you will be one of the Christians of this nation that will stand up and say, I forbid it. The answer is no. It shall not happen. You see, again, this is a nation of the people, by the people, and for the people. And if there was ever a time in history of our great United States of America, you have come to that moment when by the stroke of a pen, God's blessings can be removed from it. When we are the superpower of superpowers in this generation, blessed by God, appointed by God, fulfilling the prophecy and the destiny set forth thereby, with the promise that we will always control our gates as long as on repentance and that we try. But I tell you this, if this law or benchmark or precedent come into motion, you will see a punishment upon this nation financially, politically, and no doubt even against our enemies in war. The fall of every nation has been sodomy. How can the citizens sit back and take note? And how can the so-called congressmen of this nation, I've seen letters that have been returned to people saying, well, we accepted racism, we accepted this, and the people will accept this also. No, we won't. When do we come to the end of feeling you can slowly go along and change until you can do away with Christianity? For at this moment, we have a government that is non-religion, against religion, anti-religion. Any group can speak out. But if you mention, it can be even a talk show. If the person that calls states that they're a Christian and mention God's name, they're cut off just like that. They're handled as though they were ignorant and have no knowledge whatsoever. It is time, my friend. Do you love your children? Do you love your grandchildren? Then you're not going to hold still for this. It is too much. We will not let the ignorance of congressmen and commanders-in-chief remove our Father's blessings from us and destroy this nation. God hates an abomination. And I, for one, will have no part. And I will speak with every breath to see that this does not happen. And even if some jerk should try to sign it into law, we will not hold still for that. We will fight and fight and fight, because my Father's blessings on this nation have always been, and we're not going to let some jerk, graft-dodging, womanizer put an end to it. It's not going to happen. Am I calling somebody names? No, I'm just telling you the truth. Every word I have said is the truth, and I'm honest within that. What a shame. And it shows more and more as days go by, that shame. It's time to do something about it. How about you? Do you care about your children? Care about yourself? Do you care about our great nation? Do you care about your Father? How He will cry if we don't do something. There are various programs whereby people will give you 900 numbers, which means you're going to pay $2 or $3 a minute while you talk to some machine. And when your political electees, those we have in office, get their numbers, they don't think anything about it because it's a mass farm and they go, oh, they did it. It must come from you. Don't call me. I don't want to put your name in my computer just because you're a good American citizen. Many churches have you call the church so that they can put your name on the list. That doesn't do any good. I don't want you calling this church. If you're a good American, if you're an ex-serviceman, I don't care if you're even an unbeliever, you believe enough if you're Christian born, that you know right from wrong and that this is too far and we must stop it. And this is what we're going to do. You're going to call and you're going to put, I'm going to give you a mailing address and I'm going to give you telephone numbers. I think it's well if you do both. Do it in your own hand and don't make it a printed out form. Do it in your own hand and honestly put down what you feel about it. Don't hold back. Don't call names as your old pastor does sometimes necessarily. It's up to you, you know. But at least if you do, make them true names, befitting, and even if it's a descriptive noun, let it be. But be nice and to the point and simply, but there is one line. We're not going to put up with it. Did you hear me? We're not going to put up with it. It's not going to happen. We don't intend to let it happen. And that should be your message. Doesn't hurt. You see, the reason your own hand or your own call counts to your congressman, you're the one that voted for them. It doesn't hurt to remind them that any elected political official that wants to participate in sodomy should never represent this nation, and that you will never vote for them again. They should be drummed out of the core. I mean, don't be bashful, my friends. Our Father's blessings on our nation depend on you. What can I do about it? I'm about to tell you. You're a citizen of this nation, and your voice counts. And when the pressure is put on, don't worry, they listen. As long as you do it the way I'm telling you to. Do it by telephone, your own personal message, not mine. Thoughts, or to write a letter in your own hand. Doesn't hurt to type it if your handwriting looks like mine where they couldn't read it anyway. But it's best if you have a nice handwriting or a readable handwriting, do it in your own hand. That goes a long ways, friend. But whatever you do, do it. Time it. There is an urgency on this. I may ask you one more time to do this before July the 15th rolls around. We're not going to let it happen. You are somebody. You are mature enough to think for yourself. And you know this is not right. And you're going to do something about it, whether you're a member of this church or what. You're going to participate because it's your nation. We cannot turn it over to the dogs. We're not going to turn it over to the dogs. We're going to stand up. For there have been many brave men and women that have shed their life's blood, that the blessings of God through freedom of religion and freedom of speech would be in this nation, with a constitution that was basically taken from this Word of God. Our constitution was. And this Word of God says we should not stand for it if we want God's blessings to continue in this nation. Father, I ask that every heart and mind be touched unashamedly to know this is the moment.